Hi, welcome to Project Badlight Devlog 1. I'm Donsky, a Canadian game developer with experience in Unreal Engine, looking to put my skills to the test by creating a game that an entire community can come together to enjoy. This devlog is a behind-the-scenes documentary series about the roguelike game that I've been working on called Project Badlight. With this devlog series, I'll be sharing progress, features, and goals for the game, and I'd like to take you with me on my journey to creating the best game that I possibly can. In this introduction episode, I'll be covering different topics to give you an idea of what this game is about, where it's currently at in development, and my plans for the future of the game. So strap in for the ride. I hope you enjoy. Project Badlight is a medieval fantasy first-person roguelike with directional melee combat and intuitive magic spellcasting. Fight your way through procedurally generated dungeons alone, or in a party of up to 4 players in an attempt to defeat the final boss and escape the dungeon. First, select your base class, each coming with different starting items and passives that provide different playstyles and utility for the team. Enter a randomly generated dungeon floor, survive, and gain power by slaying various creatures and collecting resources, then search for the exit, which will be in a different location every time. Upon successfully clearing a dungeon floor and finding the exit, you and your team will be sent to the intermediary stage, which contains shops and crafting stations for you to spend your gold and resources to tailor your build by upgrading your armor and weapons, or purchasing various consumables and upgrades to aid your survival in the dungeon. Once everyone is satisfied with their upgrades, they'll be sent deeper into the dungeon in another randomly generated floor, which increases in difficulty as you go on, presenting not only stronger variants of enemies you faced on the previous floors, but also additional enemy types which you'll have to learn how to fight. After a certain amount of floors cleared, you must then face a powerful boss-type enemy, which will put your build and skills to the ultimate test. Project Badlight is a hardcore roguelike, in which the main idea centers around the classic loop of fighting through a series of progressively difficult randomized stages in order to defeat the final boss and complete your run. This format is essential to the roguelike genre, but in the case of Project Badlight, I aim to combine my favorite elements from different games in order to create a fresh experience. The main game inspirations for Project Badlight is Barony and Risk of Rain 2. While these two games are very different to each other in many ways, they're both quite faithful to the roguelike genre and follow a similar format. The key elements from these games that intrigues me are the initial goal, character selection, power gain, and the randomized gameplay. The initial goal. You progress through a series of stages with the ultimate goal of defeating the final boss, which is a challenging fight that tests your skills and knowledge of each game's systems. How you achieve this goal can vary wildly, starting from the menu screen before you even begin a run, which brings us to the character selection. I really like how there's a clear distinction between certain characters that have different fighting styles and provide different utility and support for your team from the get-go. You start each game with a base allocation of stats and skills, which can be further increased by leveling up during a run, and your combat capabilities and overall power can increase drastically depending on the items you collect during your runs. These elements are tied together with randomized gameplay. The type and amount of enemies you face in each stage is randomized every time, along with the loot and items you find. This makes it so the gameplay is less than predictable and highly replayable. The second example is Dark and Darker. The key elements that are compelling for me are the heavy melee emphasis, the dungeon crawling, and the atmosphere. Fights can usually end up in your face, where you may have no other choice than to draw your melee weapon to defend yourself against your opponent. No matter if you're playing a ranged or magic-based character, each class comes with various melee options if push comes to shove. Even if you're inherently weaker than other classes in melee combat, you can always overcome tough melee encounters with pure skill. What makes Dark and Darker so compelling initially for many people, and myself included, is the dungeon crawling aspect. The idea of diving into a dungeon and navigating through random and unfamiliar rooms with the goal of finding rare loot and not knowing what awaits you in every room is thrilling. Combined with the dark medieval fantasy atmosphere, it all comes together to create an unforgettable experience. The last game example for Project Badlight's inspiration is more of a collection of different games in the first-person melee slasher genre, but they all share some similarities in the key elements. Directional combat, easy to learn, hard to master, and a visceral feeling. Project Badlight draws its main combat inspiration from Mortal Online 2's 4-way directional combat system. You have 4 directions which you can choose to attack or block: left, right, up, and down. To land a proper hit and damage your opponent, you must attack them from a direction that they are not blocking. If they're blocking in the up direction and you attack them with a stab from the down direction, you'll land a hit. If the opponent blocks your attack, you typically lose your attacking initiative and it's their turn to attack you. The simplicity of the core directional combat is shaken up by mastering additional systems tied to the base combat, explained by the game design philosophy of easy to learn, hard to master. While the concept of directional combat on the surface is easy to learn, there are additional mechanics such as feinting, ripostes, and combos which make mastering the system a lot more difficult and adds to skill expression. What makes these games stand out from other types of fighting games is the visceral feeling. The feeling of getting hit and landing a hit, combined with the in-your-face nature of first-person melee combat, gives a feeling like no other. It is a lot more immersive and intense in my opinion, allowing you to really get into the gameplay and get a good feeling of the combat in ways that I don't think can be provided from third-person games. These examples are the main inspiration for Project Badlight, and the core mechanics were designed with all these games in mind, along with some of my own twists to fit the overall game loop and style for Project Badlight. Core mechanics are systems in the game which are a key part of the main game loop. All the mechanics that go into a game are important, of course, but it's wise to have some level of priority in terms of development time and resources. The core mechanics that I've focused on developing up until this point are what I consider to be the top priority in order to establish an enjoyable experience and gameplay loop from the get-go. This is the combat, the enemy AI, inventory and items, and of course, dungeon generation. These mechanics should be the best systems with a high amount of testing and development time associated with them. When compared to other games in the same genre, these mechanics should stand out to the player and be enjoyable enough on their own without the rest of the supporting systems that come together to make the final experience. The second priority, or supporting mechanics, are the systems that provide more layers of depth to the game and tie everything together into the cohesive experience that a game of this magnitude should be. In this devlog, I'll showcase the current progress of the core mechanics. Even though these mechanics are far from being fully production ready, some of which are even using placeholders, everything shown here is already working in an online multiplayer environment and have been tested in real packaged builds using Steam's online subsystem to facilitate peer-to-peer servers. The following clips should demonstrate the gameplay direction that this game is going to have, and I'll go through them in as much depth as I can. Melee is the bread and butter of the game's combat. At the core of the melee system, Project Badlight presents you with the ability to attack and block in 4 different directions: left, right, down, up. To begin an attack in your direction of choice, simply move the mouse in the direction you would like to attack in, then click and hold your left mouse button until the circle in the center of your screen is full. Once the circle is filled, you are ready to release your attack from the direction you charged, dealing full damage to any target that your weapon collides with. Blocking works within the same 4-way directional restriction as attacking does. You must input your block in the incoming attack direction before the enemy's weapon collides with your player model. If you successfully block an enemy attack, any damage that you would have taken from that attack will be completely negated, and you are rewarded with the ability to riposte, which will grant you a short time period where it cuts your weapon's attack rate in half, essentially allowing you to charge your next attack twice as fast. You may also feint your attacks, which is simply the ability to cancel your currently charged attack. To perform a feint, you must simply tap the feint keybind while your attack is charging or charged. This will smoothly return your attack state to idle, allowing you to immediately charge another attack. You may also perform a charged feint, which is the ability to give yourself the decreased attack rate that is granted from a successful parry. This is performed simply by holding your charged attack until the dot in the center of your screen turns green. You will then have a short time period where your attack rate is increased, exactly like when you parry an attack. Magic is the supporting combat system behind the main melee system, and using it follows a similar format to using melee. Project Badlight will have 3 main types of magic spells: Hit Scan, Projectile, and Area of Effect. Currently, only a Hit Scan and Projectiles are in the game, while Area of Effect is still under development. If you have a spell selected while unarmed, pressing and holding your left mouse button will begin casting the spell. Once the circle in the center of your screen is filled, you're ready to release the spell onto your current target, causing the target to gain the effect of the spell. You may also cast any spell on yourself by holding right-click instead of left, causing yourself to gain the effect of the spell once released. Be careful though, because this means you can also damage yourself depending on whichever spell you're using. Casting spells costs mana, which is your primary resource pool as a magic-based character. Each spell has an associated mana cost, and if you don't have the required amount of mana for the spell you want to cast, you may not cast a spell. As it stands right now, there are 3 different magic spells implemented which explore the 3 main utilities of magic that I want to cover. The first spell is Minor Heal, a hit scan magic spell which provides a small amount of direct healing to the target you release the spell on. The second spell is Magic Projectile, Void Missile, a simple yet highly powerful projectile which explodes on impact, causing large damage to any enemy on the receiving end. Lastly, a buff spell, Haste. Haste is a hit scan magic spell which, once applied to the target, grants a buff which increases movement speed for a short duration. The second core mechanic is Enemy AI. The basic enemy type is a Skeleton Grunt, which can chase you and attack from all 4 directions, which can be blocked, and they can be killed with melee or magic. Other enemy types and their unique attack patterns are still under active development, such as the Vile Insect, which will shoot poison projectiles that need to be dodged with movement rather than simply blocking. The amount of damage you deal to and receive from AI also depends on your character stats and equipment, which we'll cover now. Project Badlight currently features a fully functional equipment system with over 20 unique items that pull their stats dynamically from a data table. Your currently selected class also dictates how much additional base damage you deal with certain weapon types, giving each class a preferred weapon of choice. Let's take a look at the weapon system and how damage is calculated. Each weapon has 2 base stats, base weapon damage and attack rate. The attack rate determines how fast you charge your weapon's swing and is displayed in seconds. Simply put, if a weapon's attack rate is 0.5, that means it'll take half a second to charge the weapon's attack. Base weapon damage is the amount of damage your weapon deals without any modifiers. Your weapon damage is multiplied by its respective damage bonuses, which is currently dictated by your character selection, but will eventually be influenced by item stat rolls and player attributes in the future. Your attacks also have a chance to crit, which simply multiplies the final result of the base damage calculation by the additional crit damage modifier. There will also be modifiers to the crit chance and crit damage bonus in the future. Next is damage resistance. Your equipped armor has base resistance values which are simply all added up to reduce your incoming damage to the respective damage type. Certain characters have an increased base resistance to different damage types, such as the Knight, with additional melee damage resistance. The final core mechanic that's essential to Project Badlight is the randomized dungeon generation. This is what will help in keeping each run feeling fresh, and it adds layers to the replayability factor of the game. The dungeon generator has a pool of rooms to choose from, with varying types, and each room has connection points, which determine the exact location that the room can generate a connection to another room or be blocked by a wall. Once the dungeon generation starts, the spawn room is placed as the center module, and rooms are placed outwards from the center, all connected by the connection points. Once the generation is complete, a check is made to see which connection points lead to a new room or if there are no rooms connected to the connection points. If the connection point leads to a new room, a door module is created. If the connection point does not lead to another room, then a simple wall module is assigned to the connection point, blocking it off. All of these core mechanics were designed and developed with 4-player online co-op functionality at heart, so not only is everything simply working on its own, it's all functioning in a networked environment, using Steam's online subsystem to facilitate the creation and management of peer-to-peer servers. You can of course play solo if you want, but everything is better with friends. Project Badlight is an ambitious project for a solo developer, and it's going to take time, but I'm fully committed to making this game the best I possibly can. It has been a time-consuming process to put everything together so far, and I've always felt like I should have released this devlog in smaller portions sooner rather than later in the earlier stages, but I wanted to be absolutely sure I can overcome the main challenges of developing a multiplayer game before opening up the project to the world. I'm happy to say that all of the main challenges have been overcome, and the development of the core mechanics are nearly complete, and that I'm confident that I can make this happen. For the current short-term roadmap, and what I've been actively working on fleshing out, is the dungeon generation and AI. The main focus of this update is to stress test the dungeon generator, and ensuring the dungeon generation always executes smoothly and without fail. Second to that is introducing new enemy AI types, which not only brings in the much needed combat diversity, but also introduces new fighting mechanics to keep engagements dynamic. Next on the roadmap is system expansions, bug fixes, and polish. This is actually going to be a series of smaller but more frequent updates that aim to flesh out the gameplay loop and overhauling certain game systems. Gameplay systems that you can expect to see make its way into this series of updates includes basic iterations of the loot system with shops and crafting, resource gathering, character skills, and much more. In terms of system expansions, I intend to add on to nearly every system that's available. Melee will receive new ways to deal damage, there will be a plethora of new magic spells, new loot items and equipment, new dungeon rooms, and much more. Once I'm content with all of the additions, there will be a layer of polish added to all of the systems, and I'll release a public Steam demo for the world to enjoy a vertical slice of Project Badlight. This demo will provide some insight for what it would feel like to play the finalized version of the game, and will be focused on playtesting the actual gameplay loop, which is going to be surviving the dungeon, fighting challenging enemies, and your loot progression. More information on the public demo will be revealed throughout the upcoming devlog episodes, and you'll be able to see firsthand which systems are being worked on throughout this series. This was the introduction devlog episode for Project Badlight. I have many other episodes coming that will be a bit shorter and more theme focused on some aspect of the game, but the format will be quite similar. It'd be awesome to hear your thoughts about this game idea, and also, because this was my first devlog episode, if there's any feedback on how I can improve the upcoming episodes, I'd like to hear that as well. If you'd like to join the community and learn more about this project, join the Discord server through the link in the video description and come say hello. If you'd like to support Project Badlight, some of the best ways to do it would be to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this project with your friends. You can also wishlist the game on Steam. If you'd like to take your support a step further, consider checking out the Patreon for Project Badlight. You can gain some cool perks such as early access to new devlogs and work-in-progress features, your name listed in the game credits as a contributor, as well as the ability to test private builds of the game. Everyone will be able to play the demos for free when they're ready, but supporters will have the choice to test smaller portions of specific upcoming mechanics and give feedback before they're fully fleshed out and polished up for the milestone releases. Thank you so much to all my Patreon supporters, and I'd like to give an extra special thanks and shout out to Minx, Jome, Mud, GT, and all of the amazing people over in the Bad Company gaming community. Without you all, none of this could have ever been possible. Thanks for watching the first Project Badlight devlog. Stay tuned for more development updates, and I'll see you in the next episode.